You! That's right, you. Get in here. Don's calling you. Got some business to discuss. Grab a seat. You doing okay? Of course you are. You're above ground, you're still breathing, and it's almost Christmas. How can you not be doing good? It's the festive season. Anyway, I called you in here because I got you a present. You like presents, don't you? Of course you do. If you flash back to about a few weeks ago, you'll remember that I did a video about second string fighting games, we'll just call them. Yeah, I originally called the video Fighting Games No One Played, but what a mistake that was, right? If there's one thing I learned about covering retro titles, especially fighting games, it's that no matter how obscure you think a game is, someone somewhere has not only heard of that game, but they played it themselves. Anyway, that video ended up being the most popular video on my channel, with over 10,000 views and rising. Now obviously that's not PewDiePie or Mr. Beast numbers, but for a small fish in a big pond like me, that's what we call elevation. Now if there's one thing I learned about being a YouTuber, it's that when you come across something good, you gotta strike when the iron's hot. So today, I'm gonna hit that anvil while it's indigo hot. I went through your comments and I grabbed your suggestions. I tried to get as many as I can, so if I missed you, blame the mind, not the heart. I also had my boy Johnny Zamboni look into finding some more titles. Like the last video, I'm gonna give you the skinny about the titles, and I'll try to tell you where you can find them. That's if you want to get them legitimately. Of course, there's also the option of doing a little seafaring if you catch my drift. Between what I've found and some of the stuff that you guys recommended, there are some games that are going to be on this list that I haven't even heard of until I started working on this video. I think you guys are going to be surprised by some of these entries. And because it's Christmas, I'm doubling the size of the package. Meaning this video, you get 20 games. Ain't I great? Of course I am. I'm the Don. So to recap, in order to qualify, a game has to be a two-dimensional fighter released during the 90s, and it has to be developed by someone other than Capcom, Midway, or SNK. I'll be doing 3D fighters in another video, and in this video I'll be bending the rules for a few entries. Enough of me talking though, we're gonna hop in and get started. Shout out to Ramsey2761 in the comments for mentioning this in the last video. I was going to put this one in the last list, but I'm still giving it up to him anyway. Known in Japan as Dead Dance, Tuff E Nuff is a 1993 Super Nintendo fighting game from Jaleco. Playing as one of 4 fighters, you defeat a number of bosses in a post-apocalyptic world in order to face their leader, a guy named Jade. You only have 4 characters to choose from in the story mode. However, you can play as the bosses in the other game modes by use of a code. It's your typical mid-90s fighting game, so while it isn't mind-blowing, it's not terrible either. Of course, the only major issue is that you only have access to the 4 characters unless you use the aforementioned code, and then that's only in the versus modes. The bosses do have some unique character design, so there's that. Also, you'll notice that the health gauges are on the side of the screen rather than the top. So I guess that's pretty revolutionary in fighting games. You can play Tuff E Nuff as part of the Switch Online Super Nintendo collection, so if you got a Switch, check it out. So I'm going to bend the rules for this one. Matter of fact, I'll be doing it quite a few times throughout this video, so be warned. While this game was published by SNK, it was developed by ADK. If you saw the last video, by the way, here it is if you didn't, ADK developed World Heroes. Now the first thing you'll notice about this game is its title, Aggressors of Dark Combat. These guys are clearly aggressors, but there's nothing really dark about it, and don't go into this expecting Mortal Kombat's blood and gore. Although part of me wonders if the developers were trying to cash in off the popularity of Mortal Kombat and were marketing this on name value alone. Maybe somebody would come across the arcade machine or see the Neo Geo cartridge and think they were playing Mortal Kombat, then be let down by the lack of fatalities. But enough of that. Instead of fights taking place on one plane, you can move freely around the arena, and there are only 2 attack buttons plus a jump button. You can grapple opponents and you can break grapples when they're done to you, and the audience will even toss out weapons that you can use during the battle. It feels more like a beat 'em up with fighting game elements instead of a straight up fighting game. The game's cast is made up of 8 characters, including Fuma from World Heroes for some reason. The game's combat system isn't all that deep compared to other fighters, and the character designs are somewhat generic, but it feels different enough to at least give it a look. If you remember old school 80s pre-Street Fighter 2 fighting games, like Pit Fighter and Violence Fight, you at least want to check this one out. If SNK ever decide to revisit this game, there are a ton of things that they can do with the formula. Maybe have matches with multiple characters, like a triple threat or a 4-way, maybe having tag team matches, battle royales, interactive arenas, all that good stuff. If you want to find it, it's usually included on various Neo Geo plug-and-play devices, particularly the Japanese Neo Geo Mini. Of course, you can also go to William Kidd route too, if you catch my drift. Shout out to Kuraga182 for mentioning this game in the last video's comment section. Toukidenshou Angel Eyes is a bizarre looking 1996 fighter from Tecmo. The first thing you'll notice about the game is its all-female cast, including a ninja, a biker, a little girl who fights with a teddy bear, and what looks to be a blatant rip-off of Nina from Tekken. The second thing that stands out is its art choices when it comes to the characters, as they are wildly inconsistent throughout the board. Some of the characters are 2D pixel art, while others are 3D rendered. Hell, even among the 2D and 3D characters, you have characters with different sizes and animation styles. The characters even have a different art style when you see them on the character select screen, and that's the only time they all have the same art style. It's weird as hell, but thankfully, the fighting game is responsive and halfway decent. The game was originally released in Japanese arcades and later bought to PlayStation, where it will receive extra content. It would also come to the PlayStation Portable and PlayStation 3 by way of the PlayStation Network store. It would finally come to the US for the first time last year thanks to Hamster's Arcade Archive series, with this version available for purchase on the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch. I'm probably going to go more into a deep dive of this game in a later video, so let me know if you want to see one in the comments. Matter of fact, if you want to see me cover any of these games, let me know. Speaking of all-girl fighting games that never made it to the US, Asuka 120% is a fighting game series that was developed by a little-known company called Fillin' Cafe and published by FamilySoft. The original game will be released on the FM Towns and Sharp X68000 home computers, although later entries will be released on the TurboGrafx Super CD, Sega Saturn, Sony PlayStation, and Microsoft Windows. The game footage you're watching now comes from the Sony PlayStation game Asuka 120 Final Burning Fest, which is the second to last game in the series. The game involves a fighting tournament at a school in which the participants are representatives of school clubs. The main character, Asuka, is a representative of the chemistry club. There are also representatives from the karate club, the volleyball club, the softball club, and the pro wrestling club, with their movesets being what you'd expect. The game kind of reminds me of Capcom's rival schools with the whole academic theme. One thing I noticed about this particular entry is that it's really fast paced and that it rewards you for being aggressive. It's really easy to close in on your opponent and rack up the hits. Almost reminds me of Killer Instinct. You could even get away with some button mashing. A few years ago, developer Opera House announced via Twitter that 2 new Asuka 120 games were on the way. The first, Asuka 120 Reborn, is coming to the Mega Drive, that's the Sega Genesis for us Yankees, with an enhanced version coming to the Nintendo Switch. The second game will be the series' first 3D entry and will be coming to current generation hardware and PCs. The series never left Japan, but that won't stop any true Buccaneer from checking these games out. By the way, shout out to M. Scott Johnson 3424 for letting me know about this game. Props to Danny Hack for putting me on to this game. Also, because so many people in the last video clowned me for pronouncing DOS as DOS, I wanted a chance to redeem myself. Anyway, before the days of Fortnite, hell, before the days of Unreal even, Epic Games published this 101 Robot Fighter, which was developed by Divergence Entertainment. What's unique about this game is that not only can you choose a robot to fight with, but you can also choose a pilot. Each pilot and robot has separate stats, and this adds to the replay value, as no 2 robots will fight alike since they'll have different pilots. While the backgrounds aren't much to look at, many of them do have traps which add to the gameplay. One stage has a spike that comes out the background, another has an electrified steel cage, while another has fighter jets that swoop down to blast you. The game also has a tournament mode where you can earn money to upgrade your robot's abilities. The music's actually pretty good too, thanks to Kenny Chow. The original game was made freeware in 1999. You can either get it to work on a DOS box, or you can try OpenOMF, which is an open source remake of the game. However, this version is as of now unfinished with several bugs and missing features. You can also play the game in your browser on the Internet Archive site. The developers will create a sequel, One Must Fall Battlegrounds, which was released on Windows in 2003. Like most of these games on this list, One Must Fall could use a true remake. The game was ahead of its time and it had a lot of features that you really didn't see in fighting games back then. I bet if enough people discovered this game, then the fighting game community would really eat this game up. Konami is not a company you would normally associate with fighting games, at least fighters that don't have the Ninja Turtles in them. However, older heads remember games such as Galactic Warriors and Yai R Kung Fu. If you've been to Aladdin's Castle or any other arcade sometime during the mid-90s, you might have ran into a Marshall Champion's cabinet tucked away toward the back. Shout out to TPAT513 for reminding me about this game. Marshall Champion is a game. It was released in the arcade in 1993 and would hit the Japanese PC engine Super CD later that year. It's nothing special, but compared to something like Rise of the Robots, it's not a total dumpster fire. You have 10 playable characters, which include your typical army guy, your typical martial artist, and even an Egyptian princess. You also have Avu, your stereotypical Saudi Arabian sultan, although the in-game flag is from Iraq. Oh, and there's a Kenyan who fights with a spear. No comment. Perhaps the biggest change that this game has compared to other fighters is that the HUD sits at the bottom of the screen instead of on the top. And some characters fight with a weapon that can be knocked out of their hand and picked up by their opponent, who can then wield it themselves. Again, Martial Champion is okay, if nothing mind-blowing. If you want to play the game, you're best off emulating it. Although, as you can see, the emulation quality is lacking. Waku Waku 7 was one of 2 Neo Geo fighting games that were produced by Sunsoft, the other being Galaxy Fight, which you'll see later on this list. Right off the bat, you'll notice the zany art style and character designs. For instance, you have Dandy J, who looks like an older version of Indiana Jones. Politank Z, a police tank piloted by the sheriff and his trusty canine sidekick, and Maru, a giant purple bunny cat thing that carries a little girl on its back. It's got most of the typical fighting game features, such as combos and super moves, although in this game the supers need to be charged. The game was ported to the Sega Saturn, Wii Virtual Console, and PlayStation 2, with the latter being included as part of the Neo Geo Online Collection series. However, all these ports are only available in Japan. Thankfully, you can purchase the game on the Switch, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4 thanks to Hamster's Arcade Archives. It's a pity this game didn't get more love, because the art style alone really makes it stand out. The Fallen Angels is a little-known 1998 fighting game that was developed by Steelhearts and published by Psycho. Psycho is usually known for bullet hell shoot-em-ups, most notably the Striker series. The Fallen Angels takes place in 2010 in a city devastated by an earthquake. You get 8 playable characters and 2 bosses. The game's art style really helps set it apart. It's believed that the game was released unfinished as data miners found graphic files for 4 additional characters who are apparently supposed to be playable in the game. It was also believed that some of the staff who worked on the game may have went to SNK and took some things with them. How true these rumors are remain to be seen, but the King of Fighters 99 characters, K-Dash and Maxima, look a lot like Cool and Harry, who are characters in this game. Anyway, you check it out and be the judge for yourself. A few years back, a company called Zero Div announced that a complete edition of this game was on the way to arcades and consoles, but nothing ever came of it. So for now, if you want to play this game, be prepared to get your Jack Sparrow on. Not to be confused with the UFC reality show of the same name, Ultimate Fighter is one of those games I like because of what it tried to accomplish, rather than what it was able to accomplish. Developed and published by Culture Brain, this Super Nintendo game from 1994 is actually 2 games in one, an action game with RPG elements, and a one-on-one fighting game. The fighting portion contains 12 characters, and rather than have individual names, they are known by their style of martial arts. You have Kung Fu, Karate, US Karate, Muay Thai, Wrestling, and Boxing, with each discipline having 2 characters to pick from. The action game portion is a sequel to the NES game Flying Warriors. You make your way through several stages, taking on enemies in a series of one-on-one battles. At times, you'll transform into a superhero to take on a boss in some kind of astral plane. Along with the story mode, you have a tournament mode for up to 8 players, a spectator mode, and an animation mode. For those wondering, the animation mode is the story mode, except instead of controlling the character in real time, you actually select their attacks in a Japanese RPG style interface. Now the game's not perfect. The controls feel stiff, the hit detection can be a bit off, and the game's roster could use some more variety. Still, this is one of those games that you should try at least once. You can tell the developers were onto something and had some pretty cool ideas. With a little more work, this could have been something special. This is another one of those games that's just begging for a modern day remake. As it is, I wouldn't be surprised if we see it on a Switch Online Super Nintendo collection in the future. As for now, you can find it on eBay for about an average of $25 depending on the condition. I like games where you can tell that the developers were trying something different. It might not have panned out the way they wanted it to, but you can tell the potential was there. Voltage Fighter Gowcaiser is a superhero-themed fighting game that was developed by Technos. It would hit the Neo Geo in 1995 and later come to the original PlayStation. This will be one of 2 Neo Geo fighting games that the company will produce, the other being a game based on Double Dragon the movie, which I covered on the last list. Sadly, it would end up being one of the final games published by the company. The game had some really cool character designs. You got one guy who looks like a humanoid Gundam, while you got this chick whose character and moveset are inspired by Journey to the West. So basically a sexy version of the Monkey King. She even has a move where she can spawn a miniaturized version of herself to attack you with. Rather than using a super meter, your character has desperation moves that you can perform when your health is low, similar to old school Neo Geo fighters like Fatal Fury and Art of Fighting. Also, when you defeat an opponent, you can take on one of their special moves. There was also a manga along with a 3-episode OVA that were based on the game. This is another one of those games that you'll have to get your Blackbeard on if you want to play. The superhero theme and the move stealing are the only things that set it apart, but it's still a solid fighting game nonetheless. Out of all the fighting games that tried to rip off Mortal Kombat, Blood Warrior is perhaps the most polished. I realize that's not saying much, but compared to something like, say, Survival Arts, this game feels like Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. Developed by Atop and published by Kaneko, the game is actually a sequel to a 1993 game called Shogun Warriors. However, where Shogun Warriors was a basic 2D game with hand-drawn sprites, this game utilized digitized graphics. It also added in a healthy amount of blood and gore. I dare say that some aspects of the gameplay are a bit more fluid than Mortal Kombat, with moves that utilize fireball motions similar to Street Fighter. And oh yeah, you also have one-button fatalities, so there's that. The game's 9 characters are based on Japanese mythology, although the digitized actors can look pretty goofy at some times, and the English voice effects can be hilarious. This is another one of those titles that you'll have to hunt down through emulation, as it's good for some laughs. The gameplay isn't that bad either. Sure, it's no Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, but put it this way, it's no Time Killers either. Shout out to AshGray8678 for dropping this gem in the comments. Ninja Masters is another ADK developed Neo Geo game that came out in 1996. Graphics wise, it feels like a bit of a step back. You don't have that scale in, scale out effect that a lot of Neo Geo fighting games had. Thankfully, the gameplay makes up for it. Ninja Masters is a weapon-based fighting game similar to Samurai Showdown. However, you can actually draw and holster your character's weapon, which changes up the gameplay a little bit. The combo system is pretty fluid too, and it's easy to rack up hits on your opponent if you know the right moves. You get 10 playable characters along with 2 bosses. You can find it on the Neo Geo Mini and Hamster's Arcade Archives. As far as Neo Geo fighters go, it doesn't do much to stand out, but it's still another solid fighting game. This one's a bit different because you see, this is an NES fighting game, or in this case, Famicom. The amount of fighting games, or at least good ones that aren't bootlegs, that are released on the Nintendo, you can count them on one hand, and you probably wouldn't even need all 5 fingers. However, Joy Mech Fight is perhaps one of the best and most unique. As you can tell from the title, Joy Mech Fight has you taking control of robots. You have your standard 1 and 2 player versus modes, along with the story, in which you take control of the good guy robot to stop the bad robots, which were stolen and reprogrammed by an evil scientist. Now, where have I heard this one before? To get around the limitations of the Famicom hardware, the characters are composed of individual body parts that float around rather than full character sprites. Not only did this free up system resources to make the animation and gameplay smoother, but it also freed up memory to add additional characters. Matter of fact, the game had one of the biggest rosters in a fighting game at the time, with 36 characters, most of them having to be unlocked. This wouldn't be beat until King of Fighters 98, which only had 2 more. Released in 1993, this was one of those late era Famicom games that pushed the console to its limits. Nintendo never bought this over to the United States, most likely due to the fact that the 16-bit era was in full swing, and they perhaps felt that it would be too much trouble to translate it. Thankfully, Nintendo bought it to the American Switch Online NES collection this past year, and there's also an English fan translation. Either way, us Yankees finally get to experience this game for ourselves. Not only is it a hidden gem amongst fighting games, but it's also one of the hidden gems of the NES. Normally this wouldn't qualify because it came out in 2002, but I'm going to break the rules here. Props to Show and Cute Boy Brian for mentioning this one. The game was co-developed by Mexican developer Evoga and Japanese developer Noise Factory for the Neo Geo. This was originally intended to be a sequel to the Neo Geo Double Dragon game. Again, see the last list for more details. But they were unable to secure the rights to the franchise, as developer Million was already working on Double Dragon Advance. Thus, Rage of the Dragons was created as a spiritual successor rather than an outright sequel. So it's not Billy and Jimmy Lee, it's Billy and Jimmy Lewis. The girlfriend's name isn't Marion, it's Mariah. That big black guy, that's a Boobo, not a Bobo, and he's Indian, not black. You get the picture. You fight in a series of tag battles. There are several default pairings, kinda like the teams in King of Fighters. This is one of those late era Neo Geo games, and it pushes the hardware to its limits. The graphics are awesome to look at, and it has some of the best music on the system. What I also like about this game is that the developers didn't simply ape Double Dragon, they used it as an inspiration to make something new and original. There are some really unique character designs. Pico Interactive and Qbyte secured the rights to this game, and a re-release is coming to all current generation platforms, like any day now. If you're a fan of Double Dragon, or Neo Geo fighting games in general, this is one you're going to want to check out. So this next entry is 2 games in 1 because they're both part of the same franchise. Also, I'm going to completely break my own rules, because both of these games were developed and published by SNK. I'm including them because they're not popular as other SNK fighters, most notably King of Fighters and Samurai Showdown, but characters from these games have made cameo appearances throughout other SNK titles. Most notably, the characters Hayate and Jaizu are playable in the home version of King of Fighters 11. These 2 games are part of the Fun series. That's F-U-U-N. What's unique about these games is that even though they're both part of the same series, both games have completely different gameplay mechanics. All the characters have a weapon that they fight with. The main character, Hayate, fights with a boomerang. You don't see stuff like that in fighting games. Unlike games such as Samurai Showdown, they can throw their weapon for a projectile attack, and there are 2 planes of combat that players can switch between, kinda like Fatal Fury 2. Kizuna Encounter, the game's sequel, switches up the formula in favor of a tag battle system. The tag system isn't like Marvel vs. Capcom where you can go all willy-nilly with it, but you gotta be in a certain zone in order to be able to tag out, and if one teammate loses, that's it for the whole match, so you gotta think strategically. The 2 games are unique enough to enjoy in their own right, and they do a good job of trying to set themselves apart from other Neo Geo fighters. You can find this one pretty much anywhere you find other Neo Geo games. They were released as part of Super Fun Combo, which is a PlayStation 2 disc that was only released in Japan. Thankfully, it's available as part of the PlayStation Network store on the PlayStation 4 and 5. You can also get Savage Rain as part of Hamster's Arcade Archives on the Xbox One, PS4, and Nintendo Switch, and it's also on the Neo Geo Arcade Stick, which I took a look at in this video. You can also find Kizuna Encounter on the Xbox One, also as part of the Hamster Arcade Archives. This is another one of those games that deserves a remake, a sequel, or pretty much anything. Will it get one? Probably not. Then again, they're making a new Mark of the Wolves, so there's hope. And oh yeah, shout out to Pazuzu for reminding me about these games. Galaxy Fight Universal Warriors is another Neo Geo fighting game from Sunsoft. While this game isn't as polished as Waku Waku 7, the outer space theme and some of the character designs help set it apart. One of the characters looks like he stepped off the set of a rap video, but he's actually an alien with magical powers. The stages have no borders, meaning they can scroll infinitely. The game also has a very high level of difficulty, even on easy mode. I had to tone down the difficulty just to record some game footage, and I still got my ass kicked. Graphically, the game isn't all that impressive, However, it does have the zoom in, zoom out feature that a lot of Neo Geo fighting games had at the time. The game also shares features with the later released Waku Waku 7, including the sentient punching bag that you fight as a mid-boss. It was released on PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch as part of Hamster's Arcade Archives, so check it out if you want to see it for yourself. So during a brief period of time in the 90s, there was this trend of making one-on-one fighting games out of beat-em-up franchises. We saw this with Double Dragon on the Neo Geo, and again in 1999 with Final Fight Revenge. Golden Axe, the Duel, would continue on this tradition, and it would end up being the last Golden Axe game for several years, until Beast Rider in 2008. In other words, this is the last good Golden Axe game. Taking place several years after Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder, you play as an all-new cast of characters, a few of them being descendants of the original Golden Axe heroes. Rather than having the power meter increase by fighting your opponent, the little imps from the Golden Axe game scamper across the screen and you have to beat them up in order to get them to drop potions. You then collect these potions to fill your meter. Overall, it's got some really nice graphics and music. The game was released in the arcades in 1995 and will later come to the Sega Saturn. It's not going to make you throw out your copy of Samurai Showdown, but if you like fantasy themed fighters, then check it out. Advanced Variable Geo 2 for PlayStation is part of the Variable Geo franchise. Variable Geo is a series of all-girls fighting games and visual novels that were developed and published by TGL, who sometimes did business under the name Giga. The games center around an all-female martial arts competition in which the participants are all waitresses for various family restaurants. Because this is anime and apparently social media isn't a thing in this world, this martial arts competition is used as advertisement and promotion for these restaurants. Why not? I've seen weirder concepts in gaming. There would also be a series of anime films based on the games. The franchise would also contain fan service and even erotic content, particularly in the OVAs and visual novels. The earlier games in the series contain humiliation sequences where a defeated opponent is stripped down and we'll just say things happen to her. Later fighting game entries in the series would either tone down, if not outright remove the adult content. The series began on the PC 9800 computer series, but would make its way to the PC Engine CD-ROM, Sony PlayStation, and Sega Saturn. There was even a Super Famicom version, although that version would contain a slimmed down feature set. Now as far as Advanced Variable Geo 2 is concerned, the game's actually pretty good. The fighting system is deep, and the graphics and music are on point. I'd go as far as to say that this is one of the best 2D fighting games on the PlayStation 1. Along with your usual arcade and versus mode, you also get a story mode. Of course, the text is in Japanese. This is another series I'll have to revisit in a later video, although I might have to do this one on X videos. But if you like fighting games and you don't mind fan service, then check it out. For this last entry, I'm going to do something a little bit different. This may not be a fighting game in a traditional sense, and some of you might not consider this a fighting game at all, but it was slept on when it first came out, largely due to the game never receiving a home port or a US release. Thanks to emulation, along with retro YouTubers such as SNES Drunk. By the way, I'm going to link to his video about the game in the description. Lots of people are discovering this game for the first time and seeing how awesome it is. If you like Smash Bros, this has a similar style of gameplay, but with a more mature theme. It might have even been the inspiration behind Smash Bros. Released by Namco in 1995, you take control of one of 6 assassins, and your goal is to kill the other 5 before battling the final boss. The characters include an old man in a wheelchair, a monkey, and a pair of twins. The arenas are big and huge, and there are tons of traps, weapons, and other interactive elements. One stage takes place in a building with an aquarium where you can fall in the water and be chewed up by sharks. The character designs are all over the place, and the action is over the top. I always wonder, with all the retro game compilations Namco has released over the years, why haven't they put this game in any one of them? I mean, we got 70 different versions of Namco Museum that have Pac-Man, Splatterhouse, and Rolling Thunder. Why can't we get a re-release of the Outfoxies? Like most of this list, the game could benefit from a remaster, a remake, a sequel, anything. More gamers need to discover this game. And thankfully, with more YouTubers and content creators putting some shine on it, more gamers will. That wraps up for this video. Hope you paisons enjoyed it. If you made it this far, I want you to do me a solid. I want you to go to the comments, tell me your favorite genre outside of fighting games. Also, I'll be doing the list for 3-dimensional games soon, so if you got suggestions for that, drop them below. Also, if you got suggestions for 2D games that I didn't cover in this video or the last one, drop those too. I might make a third video. While you're at it, because I know you like this video, hit that thumbs up and share it to let your pals know that we're the crew that's taking over gaming YouTube, so they better get in line. Get down or lay down. If you want to reach out to me, my link tree is down below. It's got my Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Twitter, all of that stuff. So if you want to get an audience with the Don, you don't even got to wait till my daughter's wedding. I don't have a daughter, but you get the idea. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I like to cover retro games, indie titles, and cool gaming-related toys. I drop anything from reviews, to previews, to list videos, just like the one you just watched. If that sounds good to you, why not join up? All you need to do, hit that big red subscribe button, and I'll make you a made man just like that. If you want to do me one better, hit that bell icon and turn your notifications on. That way, when I drop a new video, you'll get the goods straight from the Don himself. Anyway, if I can be serious for a moment, I just want to take a second to thank each and every one of you guys. Last week, I made it to 500 subscribers, and this past week, I made it over 600. My channel has grown more in the past 3 months than the whole 5 years I've been doing this YouTube thing, and it's all because of you. Whether you've been down for years, whether you joined these past few months, or whether you just subscribed a few seconds ago, I sincerely thank you for it. I know my voice is a little bit hard to listen to. I have speech impediment issues, I stutter a lot, that's why I script everything out. And I know for some people it's a chore to listen to my voice at times, and I'm working on it. So that's why it means so much to me that people are still here, still listening, and still interacting with my content. So as some people close to me know, I've been going through a rough patch these past few months. I was laid off in September, so I've been living on unemployment, and I've recently started some part-time work. But that has nothing to do with this channel or you guys, because I'm getting very close to daylight, and knowing that people out there that are watching, enjoying, and interacting with the videos I make, that's all I need to keep going. I don't do this as a full-time job. I don't see myself doing this as a full-time job. This is just a hobby to me. I like talking about video games, so that's why I'm doing this YouTube stuff. I make videos because I like talking about video games, and if it brings enjoyment to other people, then I just want to share it with each and every one of you. So, like Gemma Simmons in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. said, the steps you take don't gotta be big ones, they just gotta move you in the right direction. And with every sub, every view, every comment, every like, everything else, that's what it is for me, a step in the right direction. So, I know this is longer than it takes for my typical YouTube outro, so I just want to wrap this up. So from me to you, thanks. And Merry Christmas. But enough of the sappy shit, because I'm sure you're sick and tired of hearing me talk. If you're in the list like this, I got plenty more where that came from. In fact, I have a whole playlist of them. If you like fighting games, I got a list of those too. They both just popped up on your screen, so check them out. Until next time, have a happy holiday, and I'm Audi 51,000G, kinfolk.